Well, welcome to another edition of the Influence Global podcast, and I'm delighted to have with me an old good friend of mine, Rob Mayhew, who we've known each other for quite some time. We sort of shared panels before, haven't we? At least a
We have,
couple.
we have.
And it's nice to eventually have you on the show because I think you've done so many amazing things in your career. So we're going to have a deep dive into that, particularly around TikTok and LinkedIn and your
Yep.
creative work as well. But before we do that, just for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, perhaps you can give us a bit of a backstory here because we also have a common
Yeah.
interest, of course, in Nottingham Trent.
Yes, we
I'm a
do.
part-time university lecturer there, and we are just talking off air about the project that I've been running, and I hadn't realised that you too were a student
I'm
of the
alumni.
school. Yes, indeed,
Yes.
yes.
It's
So
where it all started, really. Yeah, so well, look, it's been great, Gordon. I'm glad we finally got to do this. So yeah, my introduction into the agency world came via Nottingham Trent. I was a student at the business school doing business studies and marketing, and you get a year's placement when you're at the university. You get a year's placement. A lot of people want to go and work at Boots. Those big multinational. They're the ones that have the really strong pitches. Then they come and talk to you at the university,
mm.
and I just no one was interested in hiring me. I don't know why, Gordon. It was probably my curtain haircut that I had or
You're
something.
unique,
Um,
Rob. That's why.
yeah, probably too unique. But there, I spoke to someone at the admissions thing, and they were like, "Well, there is this agency in London called Team LGM, and they're just based off Baker Street in Marylebone, and they've had some students there. They're a fun agency. You could go there." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that. I thought everyone was ending up at like GSK and Boots and all of that." Um, so luckily I got that job and I came down to London. My first time really, I was brought up in Felixstowe in Suffolk, so I was
Mm.
very sheltered life. And then went to Nottingham Trent purely off the fact that I heard there was 3 women to every man. That was a myth. But I loved being at uni, and yeah, so the year's placement was great because I, for the first time, got to see how work can be fun. It can be creative. There was some incredible talent was at Team LGM. They weren't really an advertising agency. They were more like a sort of below the lines shopper marketing promotions agency, but still really glamorous to me. And I loved my year there. So a lot of people who I've stayed in touch with quite a lot of people there, and they've all gone on to do really good things. That's no longer like most of the agencies I've worked at in my early 20s are no longer around. But so yeah, so I went back to uni, got my 2-1, and then came back to London. Did some sales work at like Professional Engineering magazine, and then my first big job was for an agency called BD Network as an account exec, and I ended up staying there for 5 or 6 years. Fantastic agency, working on sort of Coca-Cola, what was it, Orange Mobile, Carling. We did all the Carling homecoming gigs, so lots of music stuff. So just really exposed to, and this is as an account handler, so client servicing side, and just really exposed to shopper marketing, which is something I was really interested in, still am really interested in it. And it's actually, it was never the sexiest of all the disciplines, but actually I really love that because it's all about your selling product. And I've always, just what is that experience, through funnel experience to actually getting people to buy stuff. And that's always stuck with me. I also love writing terms and conditions, Gordon. I love writing T's and C's. Even now, I could write you a full on-pack terms and condition.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and then from there, I went to Exposure. I worked at an agency called Geometry. I was at Exposure for like 6 years. I've just done their 35th birthday. Great agency run by Tim and Rao. Very glamorous agency, very cool agency. They had like Levi's. Who else did we work on? Balmers. Again, client servicing side. But when I was there, I moved over to digital. That became a thing. So that was my first. I thought I did a course, an IDM, I think it was IDM,
Mhm.
course in digital marketing because someone dropped out. It was James Townsend, who now runs a huge multinational agency called Stagwell. Um, he dropped out of the course, so I was able to do that. So thank you, James. And then from that, I went to social media because that's when Facebook was launching. And then I just sort of fell in love with it. I fell in love with social. I fell in love with the fact that you could do all these different stuff. You could actually reach the consumer just with creativity, creative ideas. We were building apps like Find Your Tent for Hunter Boots, that sort of things for festivals. I was a community manager, so I'd be doing the community management for Hunter Wellies. So I'd be going to Glastonbury and tweeting from the tent hungover. Just really had a good time with it. And then I went client side for a few years. Wasn't very good at it, but great experience. Just different stresses, Gordon. And
Mm.
then that sort of brings you a bit up to date. I worked at Ogilvy Gray, um, Ogilvy Social Lab and Gray, and worked more into advertising. And then sort of was in senior roles within social at those agencies. So I became head of influence at Fleischman Hillard PR, head of digital, different roles as well. So I kind of found myself actually probably about 6 years ago falling out of love with social media. This is before TikTok. So I was, you basically do a content calendar. You might work with some creators, but really the work, you create some amazing content, but Facebook and Instagram wanted you to pay to get stuff seen. Otherwise, only 5% of your content, it was only being seen by 5% of your audience. And I fell out of love with that because you do this long, arduous process of getting all this content signed off and no one was seeing it unless you were spending money on it. And I didn't like the fact that, we could come up with ideas, but it was up to the studio to kind of make all the assets. So what happened was, Gordon, to bring you up to speed, is I was writing lots of strategies about all the different platforms, and TikTok came along. And I thought, do you know what? If I'm writing a strategy about TikTok and writing these playbooks for club brands, I should understand what TikTok's about. I
Mm.
thought it was just for kids. I thought it was another Snapchat. And I joined it in lockdown. So lockdown happened. I was writing strategies, and I thought I'm going to join TikTok. And very quickly, I became obsessed with it. Just found it so joyful, really fun, very lo-fi. So it wasn't like high production stuff. And for brands, that's really interesting. It meant that it wasn't about the production of stuff. You just need a good idea. And that was something really fresh. And it feels very common now, but actually at the
Mm.
time it was very fresh and exciting.
Of course.
And that's when I started posting myself. So I'd been doing stand-up comedy for 6 years before lockdown, and I just thought it was a good, during lockdown you couldn't do stand-up, so I thought I'll start making some TikToks, and I started freelancing at that point, and I was doing some consultancy for brands about TikTok because within 6 weeks I'd become an expert. It really doesn't take long to become an expert in TikTok. You just need to use it, understand it, fall in love with it, and then kind of gives you the competitive advantage basically. And then
Yeah.
I started making TikToks, and here we are.
Yeah, and it's grown and grown and grown. And one of the things that I mean, I know what you mean. TikTok, it can be quite addictive. And I heard a stat the other day about just generally social media. The average person scrolls the length of the Eiffel Tower in the course of a day. So
Brilliant.
what that means is the attention that we're in the attention economy now more than anything else, aren't we? And if
Yeah.
you haven't got that hook right, and we know,
Yeah. And
yeah.
that's really fun and exciting. And the difference is that I was always a frustrated creative. I can look back now and feel that. I'm a creative director now, which we can talk about in a minute. But I felt like TikTok allowed me to come up with an idea in the morning, and 20 minutes later, I can put it out to the world. And when I first joined TikTok, I wasn't creating sketches about agency life. It was more just bits of stand up and things. And it took a while, it took about 6 months before I did my first sketch, which was about when you go into a meeting room and someone's already booked it. And that the drama that unfolds about that. And that got like 20,000 views. So immediately I thought, oh, I've got 20 years of experience of working in offices. I can just do that. And it gives me a competitive advantage because in my 40s. I'm 43 now, but I was 40 then. I was like, oh, all the kids on TikTok haven't got that experience. So I can really come from a place of truth. And they say, you know, create what you know, and I knew all about that stuff. And it took me about another 6 months to kind of start really focusing more on agency content, because I had the confidence then that there was an audience for it.
Yeah, and
And
what I think is great about what you've just said is that you've almost created your own niche, which of course is the power of influence, isn't it?
yeah,
There's I mean, like we both know lots of people in the sort of agency world, but very few of them have really become creators in their own. I mean, I've often seen people that represent lots of big creators, and you go over to their own agency account and or the own individual, and it isn't really moving the
yeah,
needle
yeah,
too much. I mean, that there are exceptions, of course, but
yeah.
largely, maybe is it because agency people want to be behind the camera, or because they're just too busy doing stuff that they don't even
I
have
think
time
they're
to
too
do it
busy.
themselves?
It's too
Yeah,
busy, and there's too many cooks. So you've got, you know, with each agency, you've then got, you know, there's too much politics going on in terms of what are we going to say, getting stuff signed off,
yeah,
and they're terrible at their own PR.
yeah,
Basically, all agencies
exactly,
are. I've never come across one
exactly.
that's really good at it. It's funny. I mean, you know, and there's too much they want to talk about, whereas actually they should just give the phone to some of the junior people and let them run with it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really interesting because then I think you're right. When there's, and we know that in the creative world, if you're too stipulating as a brand with
Oh,
the script and the brief, it's a bit of a turn off. You're saying, well, I mean, I always think great creators are the new creative agencies if you allow them to be, and not just simple amplifiers of what your brand message is. You know, you've bought into somebody because they're very good at not only creating content but harnessing a community. So why would you not leverage
yeah.
it, you know?
And do you know what? I was having this conversation with my agent last week, just saying that, you know, agencies should be bringing creators into the pitching process,
Definitely,
bringing
definitely.
uh
Like,
you know, not only will it give you an advantage, but actually their ideas, if they've got a community that the brand are trying to win over, then bringing them in, get them involved, rather than just using them on a project basis, like you here do this sketch about something. Actually bring them into the process and hire them to be part of the team in a way,
yeah,
because actually that will give you the advantage to over the other agencies who aren't doing it.
I like that. That's really good. That's excellent.
Yeah,
And
thank
I
you.
think the
Little
other
nugget for you there, Gordon.
the other thing that I like about what you do is you have realized that a lot of brands reside on LinkedIn, and yet
Yes.
few of them literally leverage video. So you by making the videos in TikTok and then re-uploading them to LinkedIn is a bit of a master stroke, because I've seen how
You know
much
what?
engagement you get on those, which is fantastic.
I was running, so there's a comedy club in Angel called the Bill Murray, and I was running a comedy class about social media comedy. This was before I joined TikTok. So I was just a comedian at the time, but I was working in social. And I remember saying, I had a slide where I was like, bring comedy onto LinkedIn. Like no one's doing it, but
Yeah,
there's an appetite for it. It's a social media platform, just with people who are there to talk about work. So bring some humor into work and
yeah.
do that. And I wasn't doing my, I was, you know, I was talking about that, but I hadn't, it didn't click until I probably was on TikTok for about a year and a bit, and I had like thousands of sketches, hundreds of sketches, and I thought, well, I'll just start posting onto LinkedIn, and little did I know that that would then, I think it's almost, well, it's going to overtake my TikTok audience this year. I've got over 100,000 followers on LinkedIn,
I saw.
um, and it gives me exposure to brands, it gives me exposure to my audience. People aren't There's no one doing what I do on LinkedIn. There's more creators on TikTok doing workplace stuff, but on LinkedIn, it's a missed opportunity. I think it's just, you know, that's where my audience are, and a lot of people will be introduced to me from LinkedIn rather than TikTok, but
Yeah.
actually then will want to work with me on TikTok. So it's just been incredible. And you know, the video content on LinkedIn does really well,
I can see.
which
I
is
can
good.
see by the impressions and the traffic there as well. It's yeah, so well done. I think, and how
Thank
much do
you.
you think personality plays a part? Because I think you are certainly an individual that's fairly unique, particularly in your jumpers and the things that you do. But you know, when I run my influencer program, very good, he's just scrolling down to a piano
Yeah, you want to see,
image.
this is my I've got a matching scarf with this, but I didn't. It was too warm for it.
Yeah. The reason I say that is because, in my influencer program, when I help people become sort of experts in their field, I often talk about having an identity that is, remember, what are you known for? Like a brand is what somebody says about you when you're not in the room. How can you be distinctive
Yes.
and memorable?
Yeah.
And I think you've really nailed that. I'm not just blowing smoke up you. I think you really have. People in the agency world know who Rob is, because you've
You know,
created.
I thank you, and I think that's part of my marketing experience. I did clock on quite early that because I wasn't an overnight success. It took like a good year to get to 100,000 followers on TikTok, and even now I'm only on 150,000. It's not huge, but within my niche, I'm one of the biggest, and that's almost the numbers don't matter then,
Correct.
because I've got my
Absolutely.
audience, and actually, I'll probably get paid a lot more than other creators who have millions because my audience are specific. They're not just I don't just have a big, wide audience. I have very specifically people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, 50s who work in agency advertising, small businesses, or whatever.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and the brand side of it, like I've always dressed like this, Gordon. So it was sort of a no-brainer to me. And I just love these jumpers by Rowing Blazer. So I wore I owned like 3 or 4 of these. And after about 6 months of just wearing those jumpers, the founder of Rome Blaze emailed me and said, "Go on the website, pick whatever you want." And I was like, "That's literally the best day of my life, apart from the birth of my child, and then my wedding."
It's probably the
But it
best
was
day of
just
his life
wonderful.
as well, because he
Oh,
realizes what a great
yeah, but I'm a true fan, and
ambassador.
I say this to brands. It's like identify who are true fans of your products. Like there are some things there are some brands that I would do stuff for free. I'm not going to say who they are because I don't, they might come to me and want pay me. But if you can identify what creators are using your product or talking about your product, and I say this to creators as well. If you like a product, create content about it, and then they'll find you. Especially
Yeah.
that's another thing about LinkedIn is I'll follow, I'll connect with, let's say, the Heinz salad cream brand team and the agency people who work on Heinz on LinkedIn, and then I'll create a bit of content about Heinz salad cream, and one day they'll pick up the phone and having discovered me, that I love Heinz salad cream, and that so you can kind of manifest it in that way, and LinkedIn's really good for that. So you can I always say that to creators, just create content for the brands that that you love, because they'll see it. Inevitably, they'll see it. If it's a good piece of content, it will get sent to them. If I'm ever mentioning a brand, they'll always 9 times out of 10 reach out to me about it. So because it's authentic as well. I'm not just like shoehorning in talking about the Maldives or something. It's authentic to what I'm
Absolutely.
doing.
It really is authentic, and I get that. So there aren't that many creators that have worked in the agency and brand side. So I think you bring a lot of experience to the whole influencer marketing perspective. Now there are creators out there that create good content, but are not monetizing and leveraging themselves. And I think there is a certain amount of naivety there. But also, having worked a little bit for an agency, I know that sometimes they will push and negotiate those fees down, somewhat perhaps unfairly against their market rate, because they know that if they've got the gig, there's a margin in there that could be exploited. But I just wonder whether or not, and you sort of alluded to it a minute ago, that you can get a higher price point because of the audience, and you understand that. And
Yeah.
how I'm trying to get to the point about, there's creators out there that have got bigger audiences and not leveraging the value of what they have. How do we try and square that circle from a creator's point of view?
So what creators need to understand, it took me a while, I've only recently understood this as well, is that there's a lot of really good agents out there. There are some not great agents as well. So
Absolutely.
who are always looking for really good creators. So doesn't matter how big your audience is. If you've got something a bit special and unique, then there's probably an agent for you. And so I work with a guy called Raf at Talent and Brands, and he comes from, like, he's ex Coca-Cola commercial director, commercial person there, and so he knows the business. And actually, for me, I was never really good at negotiating fees.
Mm.
So having him come on board has been a life changer for me, because that's what he does. He does all the contracts, all of that stuff. And I say to creators, like, know your worth.
Mm.
Um, if a brand comes to you and they specifically talk about your content in the email and say, we want you, that means you've made a PowerPoint presentation by the agency and the brand. They've pretty much decided they want to work with you. So don't come in, let them volunteer what their budget is. Don't go in there with what you normally would charge, because often they'll come in much higher than you would probably be charging. And then, just think about how long it takes you to do all of this stuff. Like, for me, they're paying when they pay for me, they're paying for my audience, but they're paying for the 3,000 sketches I've made and the mistakes I've made and all of that. And
Absolutely right. Your
the
experience
experience,
and getting it wrong.
exactly that,
Yeah.
exactly that. Uh, and my kind of new, fresh take. So what my sketches tend to kind of identify issues or problems or things that are interesting in an agency environment. So it might be your pitching and the formatting of the slides. So when brands work with me, it's quite easy for me to go, well, actually, I can see what problem you solve. So if I can identify the problem, I can do a sketch about the problem and then talk about you at the end, saying you fix it. So
Mm.
it's quite a nice fit work. And I just think that if you're a creator, um, just make lots of mistakes. Don't think you're going to become an overnight success. Juggle. Don't give up your day job just yet. I think what it is with something like TikTok, it doesn't take long to film and create something. I just use a ring light and I use the green screen on my phone on the TikTok app. So there's no barriers to entry for me creating a sketch. I don't have to leave the house, basically, Gordon. So I just remove all those barriers when you're creating stuff, and then just reach out to the brands you want to work with. Reach
Mhm.
out to and just get a few of those under find out what their budgets are, and then eventually you'll get to a point where you've got an agent. You'll have your fee set. You'll be working out how much to charge, and then if the brands are not flinching when you're saying your fee, you're obviously coming in too low.
Yeah.
Um, and
Or
so, I
or
mean,
let's compare the market a bit really, and get a
yeah,
taster for what other people are earning, and speak to. There are some guides out there that are sort of
you're
red
right.
bars.
Exactly that, Gordon. And just like there's some days where I'd probably would. There's some brands I'd do that for 10 grand, or I'd do it for 2 grand. Like it varies a little bit based on how free I am and my appetite for the brand, and what if I can see a long-term thing. Like what I do get into position now is I much rather work with a brand over a series of sketches rather than just one. I'd
Yeah,
rather work on maybe more of a campaign or something bigger. I recently did something for Brother, who create sort of office equipment and tech, and that was picked up by. I did a poem, Gordon. I did a poem not written by ChatGPT, but I've written by me about about meetings. And I did that for Brother, and BBC Radio 4 picked up on it, and then got the guy from Brother in to feature on the radio. So it's like,
fantastic.
because that was part of a bigger campaign.
Mm.
They used me brilliantly. Like they understood what I was good at. They allowed me to do it. They got me for 3 free sketches, and it became bigger than me. Like it was great. And like, just take the agencies and clients need to take the time to kind of think about how you use. You shouldn't just be one and done,
I know,
move on.
and I think
There's so
that.
much to be had with long-term collaboration.
Oh, well, you're speaking to the converted over here, and particularly when it comes to comedy, I think it's episodal content. Look how we consume Netflix now. There's a far bigger
Yeah.
rise in people that are using on-demand TV, and they're using these reality shows, and they're watching them, binge watching them almost one after
Exactly.
the
So
other.
if you can get a series, I've done with Sitecore, I've done, and Corporate Traveller I've worked with. I always do series of content with all the Jennies and the Gavins and the people in my sketches. They all feature, and it's so much more fun to do that.
Yeah, great. Listen, it's been fabulous talking to you today, as I knew it would
Thanks,
be. You
Gordon.
haven't disappointed,
Good.
and I'm so pleased that you've been so successful in your own right,
Thank
as
you.
well
I
as.
love it, and I'm very grateful for like all the support and that I get to do this. And you know, I'm still got a day job. I'm in the office now. I don't want to give
Hey,
it up just
I,
yet.
I don't know how
I
you
love
manage
being a
it
creative director. Well, it's
all.
tough, Gordon, but I love being a creative director, which is something new to me. But and that's come off the back of my TikTok. So, you know, good things come from when you find what you love, and if you find you're good at something and you love it, then
Yeah.
you can do no wrong, really.
100%. So, how can people find out more about you if they don't know how to reach you?
So you can follow me. That's a very good question, Gordon. I should really know what my handles are now, shouldn't I? So on TikTok, I think it's Mr. Robert Mayhew, and then connect with me on LinkedIn. I am Rob Mayhew on LinkedIn. So just connect with me. I'm always I might not be quick at getting back to people, but I always try and get back to everyone on if they message me. So if you've got any questions about influencer marketing or anything, or you want to work with me, or just if you want to be a creator, just talk to me. I'll happily try and find the time for that as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob, and lovely to see you again.
Thanks, Gordon. Love to see you.